When we return, stay with us.
President Clinton says space pioneer Alan Shepard will always be remembered for the impression he made on the world. Shepard died last night in California at the age of 74. He was the first American in space and the fifth to walk on the moon. You can find out more about Shepard's accomplishments at msnbc.com on the internet. Just click onto MSNBC's special coverage of NASA's Glory Days. You can watch a video of Shepard hitting the first golf ball on the moon. U.S. Ambassador Bill Richardson has been appearing before a Senate confirmation hearing on his nomination.
Joining us today, we appreciate it.
Thank you.
It's coming up on 18 minutes after the hour, and when we come back, as we mentioned, we will have more on the death of an American pioneer, Alan Shepard, the first American astronaut in space and one of only a handful of human beings ever to walk on the moon, certainly the only person ever to golf on the moon. We will talk to another one of the young astronauts that had the right stuff back in the early 60s when the U.S. space program was getting off the ground, so to speak. Former astronaut Gordon Cooper joins us in just a few moments. Stay tuned. He was truly one of the originals. Astronaut Alan Shepard showed the right stuff as man first ventured into space. As we've been reporting, Alan Shepard died in California yesterday at the age of 74, a victim of leukemia. He was one of the trailblazing Mercury 7 astronauts, that fraternity of 7 brave men who took the first American steps to the great beyond. It was Shepard who actually took that first step, a 15-minute suborbital flight in 1961, part of which put him into space, the first American to do so. A decade later, he returned to space as commander of Apollo 14, spending 33 hours on the surface of the moon. When the public enthusiasm for spaceflight waned, it was always Shepard out front beating the drum.
Take a look at the satellites that we have, instant communications around the world. Take a look at the miniaturization of computers for the Apollo program, which give us laptops today. Take a look at the inertial platforms that took us up there and back, which are in every single commercial and military jet around the country today. You know, these are kind of nice things to have, and it's all as a result, directly or indirectly, of the money we put in the Apollo program.
That was a clip from 1994, and joining us now on the phone from Van Nuys, California.
The Apollo moon landing and the walking on the moon, and he said, this will probably surprise you. The thing that made the greatest impression on me was standing on the surface of the moon and looking down at planet Earth and thinking these deep thoughts about the ecology of this planet, about the fact that so many people were at war at the time that I was looking at it, and just wishing everybody in the universe could come to the surface of the moon and look at the Earth, and then we'd have world peace. An interesting set of thoughts from a fellow who has done so many great things, I think.
Well, that was apparently impressed all of those who went to the moon, those who flew in the command ship around it, and those who landed, was the scene of the Earth from that distance. And we all had a chance to share that with the television pictures. The idea of this was the globe out there with color, and with the appearance of life. It must have been quite impressive.
No kidding, no kidding. You knew Alan Shepard personally, I am sure. I had several chances to meet with him. What is your greatest personal memory of this man?
Oh, I remember the marvelous, that mixture in this man of the seriousness of the space program, the space flight, the work he was doing, and a great sense of humor, of camaraderie. He was a wonderful person to be with, great conversationalist, loved a good joke, and clearly loved life. I think that, you know, that first set of Mercury astronauts, as you know, were particularly special in that they were going into the unknown. That was not the case any longer. Once they'd made their flights, it was known that our program would support orbital flight, that man could survive it. And all those who came later benefited from that, but it wasn't quite the same challenge that the first men met.
Yeah, Daniel Golden, the administrator of NASA, was on with us a few minutes ago, and he said that Shepard remained a fierce competitor up until the very end, that Golden needed some help in convincing Congress to continue funding the new space station. And he called Shepard, and Shepard came up and lobbied everybody who was wavering and got enough votes so that a current NASA program could continue, even though he hadn't been associated with NASA officially in years and years. What kind of a competitor was he?
Well, I can't do any better than that. He was a tough competitor. He was darn sure he was going to get out there among those that made the astronaut program, the Mercury selection. He was darn sure he was going to get an early flight if he could. And the remarkable thing was his stick-to-itiveness throughout the space program, determined that despite the doctor's version of his ear problem, he was going to, by golly, go to the moon.
And he did.
And he did.
Walter Cronkite, thanks a lot for joining us. Also on the line, a man who must have a very special relationship with Alan Shepard, astronaut Edgar Mitchell, who walked on the moon with him. Mr. Mitchell, thank you for joining us. What's your favorite memory of Al Shepard?
Well, thank you for inviting me. Oh, I think the memory of being on the moon and his first steps when he got off on the moon and was razzed by Capcom Bruce McCandless that, hey, that's pretty good for an old man. And Alan came right back and said, yeah, it's been a long flight, but I'm here.
It took him a long time to do it.
That's right.
Was stick-to-itiveness, or you tell me, he was your commander, in effect, as the two of you were there. Was he a tough commander?
No, he was a great commander. He wasn't. He was precision-oriented, as we all were. But I got along with him very, very well. We were good comrades and a good professional team. Yeah. It was more two associates and a commander-subordinate relationship.
What's your favorite Al Shepard story?
Well, it was when he had that sheepish look on his face when he pulled the 6-iron out, or the head of that golf club, to take his golf shot. And I had seen it before, but he didn't tell me about it. And so that's when I pulled a mast from the solar wind experiment and used it as a javelin, and that created the first Lunar Olympics.
All right.
We had a good time with that one.
No kidding, Edgar Mitchell. Thank you very much for joining us today. Lou?
Okay, John, we reported earlier that IRS reform legislation would be signed today by the President. That ceremony is now underway in the East Room of the White House. We're going to join this proceeding live and see what happens.
I made earlier this morning on the death of Alan Shepard. He is one of the great heroes of modern America, our first astronaut, our first American in space. None of us who were alive then will ever forget him sitting so calmly in Freedom 7 atop a slender and sometimes unreliable Mercury Redstone rocket. As President Kennedy observed at the time, America chose to make this first risky launch in full view of the world, and our entire nation, in his words, which risked much, gained much. Alan Shepard understood the odds. He faced them bravely, and he led our country and all humanity beyond the bounds of our planet, across a truly new frontier, into the new era of space exploration. A decade later, in 1971, Commander Shepard fought his way back from a debilitating ear infection to become the commander of Apollo 14 and the 5th person to walk on the moon. On behalf of myself and Mr. Bowles, I can't help noting that there on the moon he lived every golfer's dream, taking his 6-iron and hitting the ball, in his words, for miles and miles. Alan Shepard truly had the right stuff. His service will always loom large in America's history. I extend to his wife Louise, his family, and his colleagues in the Navy and at NASA the thanks of a grateful nation and our thoughts and prayers. Now, I'd like to join Secretary Rubin in thanking Commissioner Rosati, the Vice President, and you, Mr. Secretary, for what you have done. But I especially want to acknowledge the presence of all the members of Congress here, and in particular,
was truly one of the originals. Astronaut Alan Shepard showed the right stuff as man first ventured into space. As we've been reporting, Alan Shepard died in California yesterday at the age of 74, a victim of leukemia. He was one of the trailblazing Mercury 7 astronauts, that fraternity of 7 brave men who took the first American steps to the great beyond. It was Shepard who actually took that first step, a 15-minute suborbital flight in 1961, part of which put him into space, the first American to do so. A decade later, he returned to space as commander of Apollo 14, spending 33 hours on the surface of the moon. When the public enthusiasm for spaceflight waned, it was always Shepard out front beating the drum.
Take a look at the satellites that we have instant communications around the world. Take a look at the miniaturization of computers for the Apollo program, which give us laptops today. Take a look at the inertial platforms that took us up there and back, which are in every single commercial and military jet around the country today. You know, these are kind of nice things to have, and it's all as a result, directly or indirectly, of the money we put in the Apollo program.
That was a clip from 1994, and joining us now on the phone from Van Nuys, California, is Gordon Cooper, one of the 4 surviving members of the Mercury 7. Mr. Cooper, thank you so much for talking with us today. We appreciate your time.
You're welcome, Jody.
Had you kept in touch with Alan Shepard in the years since you served in the space program together?
Oh, yes, we all get together usually several times a year. We were together last in May in Florida for the Astronaut Education Foundation board meeting and for Give the Kids World Foundation.
Do you have any particular memories of Alan Shepard from those early days that might illustrate what kind of a person he was?
Well, got lots of memories of him, but he certainly was a very capable guy, and he and I were very close. We had became acquainted in the selection program for the first group to go through for the astronaut selection program.
We've seen the film. I don't know if we have it queued up right now, but earlier today we were looking at some of the film of Alan Shepard golfing on the moon. Does that say something about his personality? I mean, was he always trying to be a little bit offbeat or have a little bit of fun with something that's otherwise serious?
Well, yeah, I think he always had a great sense of humor, and we always, I think all of us were always trying to outdo one another on jokes on one another, and everybody was good-natured and would take them. And we always kept a lot of humor going in the program, little things that would kind of relieve the tension and were interesting.
Mr. Cooper, if you could stay with us for just a moment. We have to take a short commercial break, but we'd like to continue our conversation with you right afterward. Stay tuned. We'll be right back. You're watching MSNBC.
Such a pleasure to look back at one of the greatest times in the history of our country.
All right, that was Alan Shepard speaking to NBC just a few years ago, 1994. And on the phone with us now is Gordon Cooper, one of the 4 surviving members of the Mercury 7, sharing memories of Alan Shepard, who passed away yesterday in California. And I'm wondering, Mr. Cooper, about so many of us who are maybe a little young to really remember those days, if we were alive at all, certainly remember the film The Right Stuff, which came out in the early 80s, and you were portrayed by Dennis Quaid, and he was portrayed by Scott Glenn. At the time, did you and the other Mercury 7 astronauts fully appreciate the importance historically of what you were doing?
Oh, I think we did. We certainly were very, we felt that the United States should really get behind the space program, and because we would have so many benefits that would come out of it. And it certainly was a competition. You know, it was a real leveling ground. And probably, I think the space program was really the thing that kept us from going to war with the Soviets. I think the friendship that cosmonauts and astronauts developed and the exchange of information between them is one of the things that really ended the Cold War. So I think it was a very good thing, although, you know, it was very competitive between us and Russia on getting to the moon.
And in fact, even though Alan Shepard was the first American in space, cosmonaut Yuri Gagarin was the first human in space by 23 days. Did that bother Alan Shepard at all, that he wasn't the very first person to do it?
Well, it bothered all of us that the Russians had beat us because we had the capability for several years to really get geared up and start looking towards putting a man into space, but Congress wouldn't allocate any funds to do it until Russia put up Sputnik. And then we were struggling to try and catch up for several years.
Well, looking back, we're all glad you guys worked so hard at it and finally made it to the moon in 1969. Alan Shepard, thank you so much. Gordon Cooper, thank you so much for talking with us today and sharing your memories of Alan Shepard. We appreciate your time.
Certainly will.
All right, and by the way, MSNBC on the internet has more about the death of Alan Shepard. You can find out more about the life as well by clicking on MSNBC's special coverage of NASA's glory days. You can also watch that video clip that we were mentioning earlier, that old film of Shepard hitting the first golf ball on the moon. Just go to msnbc.com for all that. All right, we have to take a short break, but when we come back, the Big Apple is the baked apple today. Temperatures in New York and through
15-minute suborbital flight made him the first American in space. As one of the original Mercury 7 astronauts, Alan Shepard's exploits and courage helped shape the NASA space program into what it is today. And joining us now from Washington to tell us more about the famed Mercury flights is George Lawson, editor-in-chief of Smithsonian Air and Space magazine. And also joining us on the telephone is retired U.S. Navy captain and former Gemini and Apollo astronaut Dick Gordon. Gentlemen, welcome to you both. Mr. Gordon, if I can start with you, sir.
Of course.
Would you please tell us a little bit about the man, Alan Shepard? You knew him, you worked with him. Tell us about him.
Well, I think the man Alan Shepard is very publicly known. He's not very much different in private than he was in public. My first encounter with Alan was as a student in test pilot school. He was one of my flight instructors. To me, he was a consummate professional, a great leader. He set an example, extremely competitive, as were all of us at that time, and probably still are. But I enjoyed Alan a lot. He became a very close personal friend. I enjoyed working with him. I enjoyed his sense of humor and his professionalism. He's been accused of scaring a lot of people, and the only ones that were probably frightened of him were those that came to him with a bad story.
As an instructor, as a teacher, what was he like?
Well, he was wonderful. He enjoyed flying. I loved to fly with him because he would always communicate with the airplane. He'd keep talking to it. And I remember one flight in particular where G-33 were scrambling for altitude, and he would talk to it and communicate with it. Like, keep going, baby. Come on, a little more to go. And he was a lot of fun to be around.
George Lawson with Smithsonian Air and Space magazine. Tell us about this Mercury team, the original 7. Put it into perspective for us and tell us who they were and what they were like.
Well, the original 7 were selected from a group of approximately 110, if memory serves me correctly, and that in itself tells you how highly selective the whole process was. They determined early in the game, I think it was a presidential decision on the part of Eisenhower, that these men would be test pilots, and they were considered to be the best of the best. I think the American public also took to them as being instant heroes.
Now, Alan Shepard is primarily an American icon because he holds a certain distinction. What is that distinction, and how did he come to hold it?
Well, as the first man into space aboard a rocket, he was the first of those heroes to make it onto television and to have a ticker tape parade and all of those things. So he was the first, and he'll always be remembered for that. I'm
sorry to interrupt you. Why was he chosen?
The 7 were chosen, and it's my understanding that there was that was a fairly random selection. But I have heard discussions among the early astronauts that he was really highly regarded as among the most intelligent and the most competent of the group.
Dick Gordon, Alan Shepard had some problems. He may have been the commander of Apollo 13, but because of an ear infection, an illness, he was kept off of that very fateful flight, of course, as we all know now, the story of Apollo 13. Did he talk about that at all, what that did to his psyche?
A little bit. I think the crew at that time, Al's crew with Ed Mitchell and Stu Russo were very, very disappointed at that time that they were delayed from flying on 13 and were were relegated to flying 14. As it turned out, it was better for them, obviously, although Jim Lovell has made pretty good headway with Apollo 13.
Selling his book and his story you're talking about.
Nonetheless, I think it was an appropriate decision. Al had been off flight status for a long, long time. He had not been on a flight crew, and in spite of their disappointment, I think the crew benefited from the additional time.
Gentlemen, that's all the time that we have for right now, but I appreciate you sharing your insights and your memories of Alan Shepard. Thank you, gentlemen. And we'd like to hear from you. You can send us your story ideas and your show comments by dropping us an email. Our address coming up on the screen right now, technology@foxnews.com. Dick Gordon and George Larson, thank you both.
As well as a lot of success. Dr. Marcus Welby. That's what I remember.
He'll always be Dr. Marcus Welby.
He will to me. That's it for our first hour of CNN Today. I'm Darren Kagan.
We are going to say goodbye to Darren Kagan, but I will continue on steadfastly with the second hour of CNN Today. We will include the lost generation of Papua New Guinea. Last week's tidal wave claimed a disproportionate number of children, and John Radler will report from the Pacific Island nation just ahead as we continue.
This is CNN.
Ahead, remembering legendary astronaut Alan Shepard, the first American in space and one of the 12 folks to walk on the moon. He has died. Police choke a deadly heroin ring in Texas and haul in more than a dozen suspects, drug dealers, they say, who targeted well-to-do high school children. And Betty Curry before the grand jury again. The president's secretary is back for a fifth day of testimony, and this is the second hour of CNN Today. I'm Lou Waters. Natalie Allen is off. One of the founding fathers of the U.S. space program is dead. Astronaut Alan Shepard died of leukemia. Last night in California, he was 74 years old. On May 5th, 1961, Shepard became the first American to fly in space when he made a 15-minute suborbital flight. Shepard's short flight made him an American hero, and President Clinton today called him one of the nation's finest astronauts. In 1971, Shepard walked on the moon, the fifth person to do so. Earlier, he was grounded by an inner ear disorder that affected his balance, and it took surgery before NASA officials would clear him to fly again. Just a short while ago, Senator John Glenn, also one of the original Mercury astronauts, spoke about Alan Shepard.
Al and I worked very, very closely during all the Mercury program, of course. In fact, I was his backup pilot on the first flight we made into space, which was a suborbital flight that Al made, and I was his backup pilot on that flight, so I worked very, very closely with him for a number of years in the program. No one was more dedicated to this country and to the astronaut program, to flying, to the Navy, to being a dedicated patriot in this country. No one is going to exceed Al Shepard in that regard.
4 years ago, Admiral Shepard was interviewed by CNN Washington Bureau Chief Frank Sesno. The session took place at Washington's Air and Space Museum, where Shepard's Mercury capsule and hundreds of other items are on display now. Here's a portion of that interview.
Remember the moment of takeoff?
Oh, yes, I do. Absolutely. I think like all astronauts of yesterday and today are always nervous. There's always concern just prior to liftoff, because that is one of the more dangerous parts of the mission. But it goes away. As soon as that rocket fires, there's so much attention devoted to what's going on inside, what's happening outside. And so the nervousness goes away, although the heartbeat doesn't slow down. It didn't have any problem on my flight. It was just an incredible piece of design in those days. And the periscope out here. We didn't have a window on my flight, so we had to use the periscope to look down at the Earth.
The Apollo console.
We really felt very, very comfortable with the display and with our ability to control it if anything went wrong, and control it when things went right. As soon as we landed, we took instantaneous samples in case something developed that we had to get quickly off the the surface of the moon. We brought back approximately 100 pounds of rocks.
Now that's the work part. Now you had a lighter moment too.
Well,
golf club.
Very last thing I did before climbing up the ladder to take off was to put the head of the yarn on there and a couple of golf balls, and took a couple of clumsy swings. The first one, I actually shanked the ball and it rolled into a crater about 40 yards away, which was a rather infamous hole-in-one, I guess you could talk about. Second one, I hit a little more flush. On the earth, it would have gone maybe 35 or 40 yards. Actually, it went almost 200 yards.
35 or 40 yards isn't many yards. John Holloman is here. I mentioned an hour ago, we both met Alan Shepard in different capacities.
You're a better golfer than I am,
well,
and so he was willing to play golf with you, unlike your partner Holloman.
I did get a chance to meet the golfing. So he had a passion for golf, and I met him a year ago in Wilmington at Coastal Classic. On and off for 3 days, he regaled us with his stories, and I was struck by Walter Cronkite saying an hour ago when you talked with him that his memory of Alan Shepard was his sense of humor and his enjoyment of a joke, which he certainly did. Some more risque than others.
Any that you think you could tell on television? From
not a one, John.
I've got one story. It's a Alan Shepard became, I guess, friends. I mean, certainly closely associated with President Lyndon Johnson.
Right.
And Shepard and I were at dinner one night, and he loved this Lyndon Johnson story that I think I can tell. I'm going to try. He said, Holloman, you know, I'm as old as he was. He was like 68, and I was like 45 at the time. He said, there are two bits of advice that Lyndon Johnson gave me that I'm going to give you. And I said, well, what are they, Al? And he said, number one, never say no to an opportunity to ride around in an open convertible car with the President of the United States. And the other one was, if you're in our age group and you see a men's room, always go in there. And I followed at least the second bit of advice that Shepard gave me from LBJ. And it's going to be a great loss. And the thing is, the guy lived such a good life, I think.
He did. Yeah. And when we were parting company, we had our feet up on the balcony over the bay, over Wilmington Bay, very relaxed after a charity golf tournament. And I asked him if he would be back next year. And he said, I don't really know. He was sick at that time, and he probably had some idea that the end was coming.
Yeah, we talked about having him be at the Kennedy Space Center with us for the John Glenn launch for obvious reasons. These two guys, you know, major competitors, but major colleagues in the Mercury program. And he said, John, I'm not going to be here. And I said, well, where are you going to be, Al? You know, stupid Holloman. And he told me he was pretty sure he was not going to be on planet Earth anymore.
For those who don't know, he was suffering from leukemia.
Yeah, and 74 years old. I was looking at his biography that NASA last updated in 1994, and the top 3 lines on the biography were just kind of stunning to me. Alan Shepard, retired Rear Admiral, former astronaut. And you look at that and you say, that's no measure of this guy. So, you know, he got the Congressional Medal of Honor for being the first American to do what the Russians had been doing for some months ahead of us, go into space. And for his toughness and stick-to-itiveness, he continued this march and this fight and this great, aggressive, wanting to win personality up until last night when he finally gave it up to the leukemia.
Yeah, he's been variously described as determined, cocksure, kind of distant, stubborn. When I talked with him, and I guess when you talked to him, I found him to be a regular guy, even though it was intimidating about the legend of Alan Shepard.
Let me tell you one more story from a dinner that we had at the Astronaut Hall of Fame in Florida. We were sitting in this restaurant, and it was a great seafood place, and the food was just being piled on. And he noticed a commotion in the bar connected to the restaurant. And he said, Holloman, there's something on the TV in there. Go in there and check it out. And I went in, and it was the night of the O.J. Simpson slow-speed chase on the freeway. And I came back, and I said, it looks like O.J. Simpson is in this white car going down the highway. And Shepard told the other Apollo astronauts, the other Americans still alive who walked on the moon, that was going on. And all of them, and I just tagged along, ran into the bar to watch that incident. And Just an amazing guy. He's as human as the rest of us, but so many qualities that I think the rest of us might not have in the same degree that Al Shepard had them. And his wife and family, of course, are mourning the loss, as are a lot of people in the United States. One more quick thing. You ask astronauts, I interview most of the astronauts who fly on the shuttle today, and the question they're always asked is, why did you decide to become an astronaut? And every one of them, over 35 years old, says, well, Alan Shepard in the Mercury capsule, I saw that and had to do it. Norm Taggart, who we talked to earlier today, said that was what got him interested in the astronaut business.
Yes, Rear Admiral, astronaut Alan Shepard dead. We're filling in the blanks today here on CNN. Thanks, John Holloman. We'll talk to you again. Additional information on Alan Shepard can be found on the CNN Interactive website today. There's a detailed account of the Mercury 7, those fellows with the right stuff, including a timeline. There are also links to related sites. That's all at CNN.com. Now, on to other news. In Plano, Texas today, federal authorities announced indictments against 29 suspects in a heroin ring that has rocked that affluent Dallas suburb. The suspects are charged with conspiring to sell heroin to 4 people who overdosed and died. No Texas or federal law allows prosecutors to charge drug dealers with homicide, but they will use new federal sentencing rules that allow for a possible life sentence. Previously, the maximum sentence would have been 10 years. Plano has drawn national attention after 14 fatal overdoses since 1995.
The devastation that was caused to the Plano community has been overwhelming, with the loss of lives and the ruination.
Making him the first American in space. He later became one of only 12 men to walk on the moon. Shepard died yesterday at the age of 74 after losing his fight with leukemia. A confirmation hearing on Capitol.
Mercury 7 astronaut himself will be flying on the shuttle the end of the year. Here's what he said about his friend Alan Shepard.
No one was more dedicated to this country and to the astronaut program, to flying, to the Navy, to being a dedicated patriot in this country. No one is going to exceed Al Shepard in that regard.
And leukemia, the leukemia that finally took Alan Shepard's life, wasn't his only battle. He spent 10 years to overcome an ear problem in order to fly again as an Apollo astronaut. And the pressure definitely was on him. This was Apollo 14, right after the fabled flight, near catastrophic flight of Apollo 13. And 14 was a success. Alan Shepard got to walk on the moon and was the one and only astronaut to hit a golf ball on the moon, and maybe that's what many people remember him for. Allison.
All right, Warren Ellie in Tampa, Florida, thank you very much. In other news, a Senate committee, he was best known for his roles as the all-knowing dad on Father Knows Best and as the compassionate Marcus Welby, MD. Robert Young also had parts in dozens of movies, including Sitting Pretty and Northwest Passage. He died in the hospital last night. He was 91 years old. And here are some of the stories Fox is following for you this Wednesday. GM and the UAW are talking again today in Flint, Michigan. This time,
Shepard died yesterday in California. He was 74 years old, a victim of leukemia. NBC's Washington Bureau Chief and moderator of Meet the Press, Tim Russert, joins us now from Washington with some memories and a flag that has a very interesting story attached to us. Tell us about that, Tim.
Hi, Jody. This here is the flag that Alan Shepard brought with him on Apollo 14. It says here, to whom may concern, this is to verify that the accompanying flag was flown aboard Apollo 14 to the moon during the time period January 31 to February 9, 1971. The flag is the national flag of the United States. Signed, Alan Shepard, Commander, Apollo 14. And down here, Jody, it says, to Luke, this really went to the moon, Alan Shepard.
Is that your son, Luke?
Luke, my 12-year-old son. Because Luke may believe a notary public, but he really does believe an autograph from Alan Shepard down below.
Uh-oh, he saw Capricorn 1 on cable, right? So he wants proof that we really went to the moon.
He wanted the real thing. And the story behind this is Alan Shepard was not only an American hero, but a very generous man and obviously very enthusiastic about the space program. And we were at an auction raising money for National Public Radio, and 4 gentlemen bid a lot of money for a round at the Augusta golf course. And I was the auctioneer. The next item up was this flag. And I said, how can people pay more for a round of golf at Augusta than for a flag that went to the moon? flown by a true American hero, Alan Shepard. I wound up buying it myself because it meant that much to me. And I said to Alan Shepard, can you imagine American flag that went to the moon and a round of golf at Augusta? He said, well, I've been to the moon. I'd like to give Augusta a shot, you know.
That's right. He's golfed on the moon, as a matter of fact.
Yes, he has. He golfed on the moon, but never had the chance to golf at Augusta, or maybe he did. But it was reinforced so many times, Jody. I was on a board with Alan Shepard for the Freedom Forum, and we met in Cape Canaveral in March. And wherever he went, he was absolutely surrounded by people, all ages, just wanting to touch him, talk to him, and he never lost his enthusiasm, particularly with the young children, boys and girls. He always saw them as perhaps future astronauts, future pioneers was a word he loved. The last time I saw him was less than a month ago in San Francisco at another board meeting. He was obviously tired and getting weaker, but he showed up, he did his work, and he maintained the same level of enthusiasm and commitment and love and affection for the space program, for the country. And this is one great memory for us, a flag that went to the moon by a great American, Alan Shepard.
And now there are only 4 of the original Mercury 7 astronauts still alive, including, of course, Senator John Glenn, who's going to go back to space.
Yeah, and Senator Glenn has talked about that, the kind of research he hopes to do. So to find out just what effect does going up in space have upon the human condition, the human system. And perhaps we could find some new insights into the whole aging process. Compliments of John Glenn. You know, I don't know if Senator Glenn will confirm this, but I went down to Houston and NASA in March, and they told me that when they took a physical of John Glenn, they gave a printout to a team of objective doctors, and they said, I see, these are the test results from a 38-year-old man.
Wow.
Add 40, and that's John Glenn, but he has the physique and the internal test of someone half his age. And as they said in the movie, and as they say when John Glenn, Godspeed John Glenn. We wish him the very best, obviously.
And in fact, we expect John Glenn to make some remarks about the passing of Alan Shepard, and when that happens, we'll carry them live here on MSNBC. Tim, I know you're a bit of a space buff, and knowing Alan Shepard a bit as you did, do you think that he fully appreciated his place in American history, in human history, I guess you'd say?
Yeah, I really do believe that the astronauts of that generation really did understand the place they were going to play in our nation's history and our world's history. They knew that space was the next frontier, and many people were reluctant to try. But when President Kennedy issued his challenge, and the United States was the first nation to land on the moon, it was this generation, many of them former military men and test pilots, who said, this is our goal, and we achieved it. We went to the moon, and the kind of research that they could bring back from that particular project only spurred them on. Alan Shepard believed in this country, believed in the space program, and there are many people now in NASA, Jody, who believe we did the moon, now on to Mars. And it'll be quite interesting to see if that same pioneer spirit is exhibited in Congress and in the White House as we begin to make some hard decisions about whether to pursue Mars.
And I suppose younger folks might not, and I guess I'd include myself in that, fully get the importance of the space race and how that was sort of a peaceful manifestation of the Cold War. Alan Shepard wasn't the first person in space. A Russian cosmonaut had done it only 23 days before, but that certainly sparked the interest and the enthusiasm and the resolve on the part of America to beat the Russians to the moon.
It was an extraordinary time when President Kennedy laid out the challenge. The Russians, the Soviets were ahead of us, and we believed that if they got to the moon first, it would show some sense of dominance by communism over democracy. And American know-how, American ingenuity, American pioneer spirit put it all together, and we got there first. Ironically, it was in July of 1969, an extraordinary year in our nation's history, right in the middle of Woodstock. It's fascinating, the counterculture and different events that was going on. But it was so important. In fact, I remember a telegram that a woman sent to the astronauts. She said, "Thank you for saving 1969." And that it was such a huge event in people's lives. I remember watching it live, a man walking on the moon. And obviously, Alan Shepard, one of the very few in our world's history who's ever done it. And we certainly remember him, his generosity, his bravery, and his human spirit, and his pioneerism. There's nothing like it in our nation's and our world's history.
Did the first spacewalk happen in the middle of the night, Eastern time, or was it at an odd time? I remember my parents waking me up and making me watch it, and I was like, hey, I see this on Lost in Space all the time. What's the big deal, right?
Get up, get up. Yeah, my dad still wonondered whether it really happened. He said,
now we know where your skepticism comes from, Tim.
Well, but no, this one I believe we were there first, and I believe that we will always lead the way in space exploration as long as there's people like Alan Shepard and John Glenn and others. And it really does take a unique spirit. I took my son to NASA, as I mentioned, and we got in the space capsule and did a simulation. And after a few minutes, I was sort of looking around at the hatches. How do we get out of here? But you do settle in, and at least for a couple hours, and it is a fascinating experience as you circle the world and look down upon the only generation, the only people, the only human species we think exists. But who knows? On the Mars, we'll find out.
Alan Shepard certainly had the right stuff to do it. Tim Russer, thank you so much for joining us and sharing your reminiscences. And as we mentioned, Senator John Glenn is expected to make some remarks about the passing of Alan Shepard. And when that happens, we will have that for you live. We'll be right back.
Searing heat, drought, what else?
News as you can in the meantime.
Okay, Lou, here we go. The man who millions of TV viewers looked up to as a compassionate doctor and knowing dad has died. Robert Young died yesterday at his home in Westlake Village, California. From 1969 to 1976, he portrayed a doctor on the television show Marcus Welby, MD. Before that, he starred as the patient, thoughtful dad in Father Knows Best. A prolific actor, he starred in dozens of films, including Northwest Passage and Journey for Margaret. Robert Young was 91. The Steven Spielberg epic Saving Private Ryan had a premiere of epic proportions Tuesday night. Some of the celebs hitting the red carpet with the movie's stars, Tom Hanks and Ed Burns, were Bill Paxton, Sylvester Stallone, Kelly Preston, Sally Field, and Gloria Stewart. The critically acclaimed film is about a U.S. Army patrol searching for a soldier in Normandy during World War II. Spielberg says his graphic portrayal of war was meant to send audiences a message.
Well, I hope they see the movie and then realize that those sacrifices were, created Generation X and the baby boomers and the other generations to come. That was the sacrifice of the 20th century that needed to be made in order for us to have a life.
Okay, while the boys are off fighting the war, the babes of summer are entertaining the troops. Appearing at a theater near you, Liv, Cameron, and Selma, they are just a few of the hot summer starlets creating a buzz around Hollywood.
This summer, a group of sexy young stars are being noticed for their breakout roles and their heartbreaking beauty. Hollywood insiders call it the buzz.
The buzz is when you think someone's hot. The buzz is when, one, you look forward to seeing them in a film. Two, they start showing up, of course, in magazines and all over. And there's just this sense that they've arrived. They're a name that starts seeping into the public consciousness.
Who's got it?
Liv Tyler is at everything this summer. We have so many shots of her coming into Us magazine because she's at every party. So is Cameron Diaz. All of the designers want to dress these young stars.
Every day I kind of think how amazing it is that things have kind of happened the way they have happened.
So how does it happen? Some boast blockbusters, others headline broad comedies.
She's still a fox. Mary's a fox. She's a fox.
I just have a good time, I mean, I like having a good time. I like having a good laugh.
Some star in period pieces and make corsets look cool.
It's a great look, and you have to go through the pain of having your ribs crushed, I think, to get that look. And I suffered so much.
They've suffered through horror and through the 70s, but they won't let you limit their appeal with a specific genre.
I think a good film is a film that everyone can enjoy. I think guys should get this chick thing fling out of their head and just open up.
Everybody doesn't have to be one type. You know what I mean? Because that's how real life is.
Perhaps Jennifer Love Hewitt sums it up best when she describes her recent film, Can't Hardly Wait.
There's this really hot babe in it that plays this kind of dream girl, Amanda Beckett. She's great. You'll love her.
And now to our female viewers, do not despair, because we will be sitting down with several hunks later today on Showbiz Today. Tom Hanks, Matt Damon, and Ed Burns will save the day with their stories about Saving Private Ryan. That's at 5:30 p.m. Eastern Time, 2:30 Pacific, right here on the channel you're watching, CNN. Reporting from New York, I'm Lauren Sidney, and now back to Lou in Atlanta. Lou?
All right, Lauren, you got it all in. We'll be looking forward to that hunk report. CNN Today will continue in a moment.
Tonight on CNN. It all starts at 6:30 when the Moneyline News Hour with Lou Dobbs gives you 30 minutes more news for your money. Then in the Crossfire, Bill Press and Robert Novak debate the issues of the day. At 8, it's The World Today. Then on Larry King Live, meet controversial radio personality Don Imus. At 10, Newsstand.
Moonshot. CNN Perspectives. Sunday.
Spend your weekend with New York One. You'll find out what's going on.
Hello, I'm Miles O'Brien.
And I'm Bobby Batista. Today on Talkback Live, death in Plano, Texas.
Heroin overdoses kill 14 teens, and police say the community was deliberately targeted by drug dealers.
Could your own cozy community be next? Call, fax, or go online and get ready to Talk Back Live next.
There's a report today that indicates the most scrutinized job search in basketball history had. In this one, the 1990s don't seem to have a definitive signpost. We'll have to get to that later because John Glenn has appeared in the Senate gallery. He's here to talk about his friend Alan Shepard, who died last night.
Good afternoon. With the passing of Al Shepard, our nation has lost an outstanding patriot, one of its finest pilots, and I lost a very close friend. Al's dedication to the Navy and to the space program are legendary, and I knew that from firsthand experience. I first knew Al when we were both test pilots at the Naval Air Test Center in the mid-1950s, but was much more closely associated with him on a daily basis when we were both selected in 1959 as part of the original 7 people in the Mercury astronaut program. And that group was immediately tossed into what we'd almost call a maelstrom of activity and attention and travel and training in preparation for those early Project Mercury flights. I think it became obvious to all of us very early in that training period that Al was an extremely intelligent, highly intelligent, dedicated leader whose high motivation toward accomplishing our mission was a true inspiration to all of us, whether it was those of us in the program, the Mercury program, other people within NASA that we worked with, the people cross-country in all the different manufacturing places we visited back then. Al had a wonderful sense of humor. There were always a lot of little jokes and practical jokes on each other. And after training all that period of time, we were all disappointed back in those days when the Soviets got out ahead of us. Those were days of the Cold War. And I remember Al being particularly disappointed about the fact that the Russians had beat us into space, whether it was suborbital or orbital or whatever. He just was very unhappy about that, as we all were, of course. Al was selected to make that first flight. He named his spacecraft Freedom 7, because that's the way he felt about this country. There was a lot of buildup to that flight, as most of you, or some of you at least, may recall. It's been a long time ago now. I was his backup on that flight, so I worked very, very closely with Al. We were at meetings every day, and I was his alter ego to represent him while, when he was training in one particular area, I'd be going to the meetings or doing training or other things that had to be done preparing for that flight. The flight was a great success. We came back to Washington here, and I think we were all shocked. I know Al was, because he just couldn't get over the reception that was given back here in Washington after that first flight. Al later on developed some ear problems. He had some problems with balance. He stuck with the program, and some new treatment was developed many years later. And Al wound up getting his greatest desire, which was to go on one of the moon flights. And he did that. And later it's the book that came out a short time ago called Moonshot, and used as the basis for some of the current TV. There was another side of Al later on, quite apart from the moonshot and the actual lunar landing and his famous golf ball shot on the moon, which some of you may remember. There was another side of Al that after his days in the space program were done, he started literally single-handedly, talked the rest of us into starting the Astronaut Foundation with a space camp down at Titusville, in addition to the one that everyone knows about at Huntsville, Alabama, for our young people. And the Astronaut Foundation was not to aggrandize ourselves. It was to provide money and raise money for scholarships for young people, as well as for some of those people doing postdoctoral work. It spanned the whole gamut of things in the science and research area. And Al worked very, very hard on that. And he worked on it for a number of years and was single-handedly, and I can say that because those of us on the board that were working with him a little bit knew of all the work that he did in that particular area and all the great work that came out of that helped so many people. So that was another side of Al I think that most people did not know about. Al finally had leukemia. Was discovered in a routine physical. And the doctors tell me that adult leukemia is not good stuff. There are lots of treatments now for infants or for juvenile leukemia, but adult leukemia is bad, and Al made it through quite a while. But I had talked to him not too long ago, several weeks ago, and he had hoped to be down at the flight in October when I'm scheduled to go again. And we talked about that quite a while. I talked to his wife, Louise, this morning, who has got to be one of the world's great women. She is really a fine, fine person. And she's bearing up under this. She's had enough time, of course, to think about it, but the loss will be tremendous. Al died last night in the hospital in his sleep, which is a good way to go, I guess, when that time comes. But our thoughts and our sympathy and our prayers go out to Louise and the girls, the rest of the family. And Al is truly going to be missed in a big way. He was a close friend and a great guy, and he's going to be missed in this country also. Any questions?
Yes. Senator, as his backup, you were with him the morning of his flight, I guess through breakfast and a number of procedures. Can you describe both his emotions and your emotions that morning, and were you aware of what type of history you were actually setting up there?
I think we were aware of the type history that we were about to get involved with that morning, but it's not, those are times when you try and break the tension, and there are a lot of little jokes back and forth. I had a picture that I had installed on the periscope, or installed in the capsule to break the tension a little bit, which he got a big kick out of. I won't describe the picture, but Al got a big kick out of that, and I think he still had that picture. And later on in my flight, he reciprocated on the orbital flight that I made in February of '62 with some of you may recall the Jose Jimenez figure on TV, Bill Dana created, and the story was about how sorry he felt about the little mouse being sent up in the nose cone. You remember that stuff? And so one of the first things I did after I was in orbit was I reached over and started to get a piece of equipment out to do something with it. And the first thing that floated up was a little felt mouse with pink ears and a long tail tied on. And Al had put that in there had put that in the spacecraft. And I don't mean to indicate that we were taking those things lightly, but these are little pressure breakers that you remember very, very well. And I still have that, the little mouse.
Tell us a little picture.
The what?
Tell us a little picture.
No, not going to talk about the little picture.
Give us a hint.
Nope.
How's the training going for your upcoming flight?
Going very well.
And what sort of bearing might his passing have on your flight? Will it be any sort of remembrance of him as a Mercury 7?
Yeah, I'm sure we will. I haven't thought about that. This came very suddenly today because the last time I talked to Al, I thought he might well make it to the end of the year at least, because he seemed to be in pretty good shape. In Al's own words, he said that he wasn't as strong as he used to be. Running about half throttle was his own use of the words. And so I thought, so this came as a real shock today when I heard first about his death. Yeah. Yes, Scott.
Can you tell us a little more about that conversation you had with him a few weeks ago about his reaction to your going back up?
No, he was enthusiastic about it, wanted to be there if he could. Didn't know whether he'd be able to or not, but wanted to be there, and we talked about that a little bit. He was interested in some of the things that I've been training on and doing at Houston. He was there for a long time, and of course after his flight, he was chief of the astronaut office there and ran the whole astronaut corps for a number of years. And so he's thoroughly familiar with all the things going on down there and all the training that has been going on at Houston. Yeah.
Senator John Glenn sharing his memories of his friend Alan Shepard from the Senate Gallery this afternoon. We'll have more on the Alan Shepard story as the day goes along. When CNN Today returns in about an hour, we'll look at a medical breakthrough on cloning, which could...
Retro 1 fired. Very smooth. Roger, roger. Retro 1 fired. Very smooth. Retro 2. Retro 2. Retro 3 fired. Looks like we got a beautiful message on here.
Shepard has freedom of action that enables him to be the first man to direct a flight in space, something the Russians do not claim even for their orbiting cosmonaut. 302 miles at sea and 15 minutes after the launching, the aircraft carrier Lake Champlain sends marine helicopters to pick up the returning astronaut. And in less than 5 minutes after he lands in the ocean, a horse collar sling cabins the redoubtable space adventurer. And the world knows that the USA's first manned spaceflight is a success, for millions have viewed it. And here it is now for all the rest of the people to see. A triumph openly arrived at shows the vast difference between free world policies and those of a secretive communist state. Shepard returns in perfect health and none the worse for his remarkable feat. And after retrieving his helmet, reports to the commander of the carrier, while the crew of the Lake Champlain awesomely examines the space-invading capsule, which gets another grateful visit from its thankful passenger. Flown to Andrews Air Force Base outside Washington, there's a family reunion as Commander Shepard is reunited with his wife and his father and mother. Next, the Shepards are invited to the White House, where President Kennedy and Vice President Johnson head the official welcome for America's first spaceman. The First Lady, with a jubilant nation, seconds her husband's words of praise and gratitude.
I want to express, on behalf of us all, the great pleasure we have in welcoming Commander Shepard and Mrs. Shepard here today. I think they know, as citizens of this great country, how proud we are of him, what satisfaction we take in his accomplishment, what a service he has rendered our country.
Must have been a hell of a time to live through. Glad that Fox Movietone News was there to bring us those memories. Once again, Alan Shepard has died at the age of 74. We'll be following his life and legacy throughout the day, but coming up after this quick commercial break, my colleague David Asman has the latest on the murder trial of David Graham in Texas. Stay with us, everybody. You're watching Fox News Channel.
Have announced indictments against 29 suspects in a drug ring that has shocked the affluent Dallas, Texas suburb of Plano. They are charged with conspiracy to import and distribute heroin. Police say that 4 people who bought the drug overdosed and died. And according to prosecutors, the ring targeted Plano as a new market for drugs because it has well-to-do teenagers. The task force of local and federal agents was put together after Plano drew national attention for 17 fatal overdoses since 1994.
This investigation and this prosecution will help to send a message out to the community and send a word out to young people in Plano and everywhere about the dangerous nature of heroin, how terrible a drug it is, and how they need to stay away from this drug, because quite simply, if you begin to use heroin, it will control your life and it may very well kill you.
Prosecutors say that new federal sentencing guidelines will allow them to seek long prison terms for any of the suspects who are convicted. Former astronaut Alan Shepard is being remembered as a pioneer in the U.S. space program. Shepard died in his sleep last night at the age of 74. He became the first American in space in 1961 and the 5th person to walk on the moon. Shepard and Senator John Glenn were among the original 7 Mercury astronauts named by NASA in 1959. Glenn calls Shepard's death a big loss.
And after training all that period of time, we were all disappointed back in those days when the Soviets got out ahead of us. Those were days of the Cold War. And I remember Al being particularly disappointed about the fact that the Russians had beat us into space, whether it was suborbital or orbital or whatever. He just was very unhappy about that, as we all were, of course. Al was selected to make that first flight. He named his spacecraft Freedom 7, because that's the way he felt about this country.
Shepard's family has declined to reveal the cause of death, but the astronaut said in a CNN interview earlier this year he had leukemia. Researchers in Hawaii report a breakthrough in cloning. They have cloned dozens of identical mice.
If you're lucky, you may even see one of the shuttles on a launch pad being prepared for a flight into space.